Glendale, once a sundown town, is now home to a vibrant, diverse group of people, including a very large Armenian community. Armenians are no stranger to hate or hate speech, and if you don't know, you should know that every year on April 24th, Armenians commemorate the Armenian Genocide. To many who are not Armenian and do not have an Armenian connection or an emotional connection to the Armenian community, this may just sound like history. But here's the thing, lessons of the past are not about history. They are about an opportunity to prevent such things from ever happening again. The truth is, the Armenian Genocide did not happen overnight, neither did the Holocaust, nor did any other genocide around the world or mass killing. They all start with a small moment. It begins with exclusion, it begins with hate speech, it begins with intolerance, it begins with fear, right? Those are the small moments that then lead to the bigger, more significant and dark times of history. And you know what? It all festers in silence. When we don't talk about it, it gets worse. So here's what we're gonna do. We are gonna talk about hate.
Promoting violence against the Armenian community.
In March of 2023, Glendale police found flyers promoting violence against the Armenian community.
Our country has seen a spike in hate incidents in the last decade as hate speech and violent acts have visited various communities throughout the United States. It is important that we speak out against such acts and condemn them no matter who the victim or targeted group may be.
At least 11 flyers with anti-Armenian rhetoric were posted throughout Glendale, several across the street from St. Mary's Church. The flyers promoted the completion of the Armenian Genocide that happened in 1915, when 1.5 million Armenians were massacred.
We stand with our Jewish brothers and sisters. Jews and Armenians share a common experience of persecution and genocide, and as such, we must share a common responsibility to speak out against racism, bigotry, and intolerance. More than half of Glendale's population, by the way, was born outside of the United States. My own family has roots that trace back to different parts of the world as part of displacement that was caused by the genocide, and we even have roots that trace all the way back to the holy city of Jerusalem.
We spoke to Glendale Police Chief Manny Sid, attending a forum called United Against Hate. Could you give us any kind of an update to the investigation of the flyer?
I don't want to dive into too many details, understanding that it's still an ongoing investigation and being sensitive to that. But I do want you and the community to know that we take it incredibly serious. I think our response has shown that in the seriousness and we take it. We're using all our resources, working with our partners here in the region, both on the law enforcement side as well as our district attorney's office, to review all the evidence that we've been able to collect, still trying to collect some more, to number one, see if we can establish ultimately if we have a crime that we can potentially prosecute, as well as work to potentially identify who might have been responsible for this.
The forum, United Against Hate, organized by the Armenian Bar Association in conjunction with a multicultural bar alliance, brought together state and local officials along with community leaders to address the growing concerns about hate speech and hate crimes.
We see hate time and time again.
The community's concerned because of a similar incident that happened in Beverly Hills a few weeks earlier.
The mayor of Beverly Hills is denouncing hate speech after
the flyers showed up on the day demonstrators were protesting the ongoing crisis in Artsakh, where Azerbaijan has cut off food and water to more than 120,000 Armenians living on ancestral land. No arrests have been made in either incident.
She said hate has no place in Beverly Hills or anywhere.
Here's a question that the community keeps and continues to talk about and is angered and frustrated by is we saw what happened in Beverly Hills, right? That incidents like this do not rise up to be considered a crime. Obviously, there's the emotional element of what that stirs up, and then there is what we can prove and as far as the investigation in courts, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so let me just start talking about a little bit about the difference between a hate crime and a hate incident or hate speech. Hate speech, I think we can all pretty straightforward understand what that is. It's someone that's discriminating, being disparaging against a certain ethnic group, cultural group, religion, threatening potentially violence, things of that nature. A hate crime, which is not dictated by law enforcement, it's dictated by the law. We have to kind of have a two-prong piece to accomplish what would be a hate crime. The first is we have to have a crime, something that in and of itself would be a crime, vandalism, an assault, something of that nature we establish as a crime. Then the second piece, was that crime motivated by hate, by some discrimination towards a specific group? So we have to have those two things. So when we're investigating and we're looking at any of these incidents, we've got to look at it through that lens. Either way, even our hate incidents, here at the Glendale Police Department, we're going to take that very serious, understanding that that's sensitive to our community, in turn it's sensitive to us, and then we also understand that there's a very fine line with starting as a hate incident and then maybe one day evolving into a hate crime. So we want to be a part of addressing that early on, investigating it, identifying who is responsible for it. If we can find a way to charge a hate crime, work with our district attorney's office and prosecute it, then we'll certainly go that route. Sometimes it doesn't rise to the level of hate crime, but we still want to give it its due attention so that we can gain that intelligence, understand who's doing these things in our community, and be mindful and vigilant to ensure that it doesn't escalate to something more serious.
Statistics show that in California, hate crimes are at the highest level since 9/11. Incidents have increased by 32% year over year.
It just makes me sad, makes me angry, makes this conversation even more important. You know, we can never get complacent, about hatred. It's sad. I mean, we had, a big rise in API hatred, last year, the rise in anti-Semitism, obviously the anti-Armenian, the genocidal tendencies of the Azeris, what's going on with the Lashin corridor. There's so much going on that all of us need to speak up for one another because, what affects one affects all of us. And, we got to just draw the line and say this is not going to be accepted in California and the U.S.
And it's what we do next.
California State Attorney Rob Bunta says that's the reason the Department of Justice has set up a Racial Justice Bureau and has been encouraging local district attorneys' offices to set up hate crime units to work with impacted communities. Sometimes there is a stigma within these communities to speak up.
We can't help you unless we know about them. We understand that there are some folks that are more trusted than others. So tell someone you trust. And they can tell us, or they can tell local law enforcement, or they can tell someone else who can help you. But you are deserving of help. It's not your fault. The perpetrator should be held accountable, and we can help you if we know about it. We know that a lot of these crimes, as you say, are underreported. Let's change that together. Report them. And we have a job to do as well in increasing reporting. We need to show that we are responsive, that we do something when we receive the reports, that we will act on these reports. So that onus is on us. We will do that. We're committed to doing all those things.
Targeted by vandals.
In 2020, in San Francisco, the Armenian school was vandalized with profane racist graffiti. The taggings also included an Azerbaijani flag. An intimidation tactic, the community calls it.
Spray paint cans to SFPD.
While nobody's claimed responsibility, campus surveillance showed several people jumping over the fence with spray cans in hand. Police called it a hate crime.
2 previous attacks.
And a few weeks later, an arsonist burned down the community center next to the Armenian church. And then this, shots fired at the Armenian school. A bullet pierced a large sign outside and another, the exterior of the building. Nobody was hurt, but this time the community called for FBI's help. Again, no one was arrested.
When people ask, why is the Armenian Genocide still relevant after 100 years? Well, this is just one clear example of why.
It's an experience I wouldn't wish even my worst enemies. To this day, I cannot forget any of this.
Historians and scholars have called it the first genocide of the 20th century.
I lost 11 members of my family.
More than 3 million Armenians, Greeks, and Assyrians were hung, executed, tortured, and exiled into starvation by the Ottoman Empire in 1915. The word genocide was created expressly to describe this crime.
And I have to beg people to believe me. That's what hurts you most.
To this day, the Ottoman Empire, modern-day Turkey, continues to deny the atrocities. Hitler followed the Ottoman Empire's playbook, and he said, "Who after all speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians?" The Holocaust followed, and then there was Rwanda, Cambodia, Guatemala, Syria, just to name a few.
Genocides have not stopped since the Holocaust.
These types of atrocities are a reminder that such acts don't spontaneously happen. They begin with small acts of hate, perpetrators leaning into the otherness of their victims, dehumanizing groups of marginalized people because, well, they are different in race, belief, nationality, and religion.
So the young people, the next generation, will never allow this to ever happen again.
This story isn't just about hate speech, or hate crimes. It is about the fact that this isn't history. This is happening today in 2023. It continues to live and breathe among us boldly.
These types of acts are aimed at scaring people, just as white hooded cowards used to terrorize our nation's black families after the Civil War, just like cowards who threw bricks through the windows of Jewish-owned businesses in Germany intended to, and just like so many other countless acts of cowards who have tried to scare and intimidate various groups, be they of a different race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or whoever is considered the target of such heinous acts.
I thought it was really interesting how you connected the dots between what's been happening historically to Armenian communities around the world, what's been happening to people in general, genocides, mass killing, Holocaust, the flyers, and then also how you came to be elected, and to just point out that hatred isn't really that far-fetched and it's not a historical event.
In recent years, I'm afraid it just feels like it has magnified here. And it could be that it's always been right there, but it's been behind closed doors, as it was in the meeting that you just described. But that meeting happened to be recorded, and so we all heard it. But I feel as though there's a willingness now to accept extreme views by many, including extreme forms of bigotry and hatred. And part of that is social media, part of it is just the loss of civility that we've had, I think, in this country, the loss of treating one another as having more in common than we have that's different. But it does concern me because we can't function as a democratic society if we were to tolerate hatred and violence and the most extreme forms of bigotry.
There is a duality here, right? We know that hatred lives among us, but then you also brought up the situation here in Glendale when years ago this was a sundown town, and it was not uncommon for people to stand up and publicly speak and say racist things about Armenians in this community.
I've witnessed it here. When I first ran for office here, it doesn't seem like that long ago to me, but when I first ran for office for the State Assembly to represent Glendale, that stuff was widespread. It was commonplace for people to have to write letters and have those letters published in the Glendale news press that were starkly racist against Armenians, unambiguously racist, and they were published in the local newspaper. You'd have people going to the microphone in City Hall, in City Council meetings, and saying the most outrageous racist things. Nobody shouted them down, nobody criticized them, it was just accepted. And I think for many it was seen as a commonly held view. So that was only, 20, 25 years ago.
For decades, Glendale was a hub for the American Nazi Party and the Ku Klux Klan. It is reported that the KKK held rallies in Glendale as recently as the 1980s. Glendale used to be a sundown town. The city used formal and informal means to keep blacks, people of color, and minorities out of the city, specifically at nighttime.
Never have I ever seen
In 2020, millions took to the streets and protested systemic racism and injustice following the murder of George Floyd. This is the one in Glendale. I attended a peaceful rally in Glendale and came face to face with what left me startled and speechless.
Are you with the demonstrators?
I was standing over there, yes.
You're not with them or with...
What do you mean?
Do you support them or...
Yes, I do. Why?
I hate them.
You hate them?
Yes. They protest about a black criminal's death. I'm glad he got killed.
You know I'm recording this, right?
Turn it off. Can you turn it off?
Breaking the cycle of hate requires our voice. It requires us speaking up and demanding systemic change.
So the Sundown Town Resolution has really been a tool for us for advocacy.
Tara Peterson is the CEO of the YWCA Glendale and Pasadena. She is a powerful voice working to create change.
In 2020, the city of Glendale passed a resolution acknowledging...
Peterson, along with other community leaders, formed what's called the Coalition for an Anti-Racist Glendale and drafted a historic Sundown Town resolution. In 2020, the Glendale City Council passed the resolution, making Glendale the first city in California to do so and the third in the nation. Pasadena and Burbank followed.
Because we want to make sure that we're acknowledging that this type of oppression, whether you're Armenian, Black, Korean, is all interconnected and linked to power, to having power and being dominant over a certain culture. And so that's, and not having access and not feeling safe. And it's taken some time, even in the city of Glendale, hasn't always been welcoming and responsive to the Armenian community as well. And that shift has happened. And so we really looked forward to partnering, and we look forward to partnering and creating bridges with the Armenian community because of those parallels. And that has been definitely a part of the work that we do. And it's work that has to continue on because we know that some of the stigma, some of the anti-racist behaviors, anybody can take on those feelings and beliefs despite their own oppressions.
We need to do better, and part of moving forward in response to the rise in hate is collaborating, partnering, standing in solidarity with one another. And as the Attorney General for the state of California, the Chief Law Officer for the state, I want our communities to know that your Attorney General has your back, and that I will fight for you, I will defend you, I will be by your side in pushing back against the forces of hate, because hate crimes aren't just crimes against an individual, they're crimes against an entire community.
The path to change in some cases, in many cases, is to make sure that there is representation in leadership positions, right? That we see people like us speaking up in rooms that normally we wouldn't be in, right? The significance of that, Alina talked about it in the newsroom. I've been on that path for 20 some odd years, and sometimes being the only one in rooms to say this story matters, or this particular perspective matters, or that saying this is hurtful to this specific community, right? Talk to me about the importance of our individual responsibility, whether we're Armenian, immigrant, or any other minority groups, to take, one of the ways we take action is by really representing. Can you talk to me about that?
Sure. I mean, I think everybody can find a way to advance the interests of our community in whatever field of endeavor they have, and to educate other people about the issues that affect our community, and so on. Some are privileged to have a position like mine where we're more able to do that. Or in the media, you're able to do that. But in any line of work, I think just speaking up about issues that matter and letting neighbors know each other, I think it has that effect. It has that effect. If they get to know our issues through somebody that they know, it has a more lasting effect.
how you can get rooms. The hatred that Armenian communities have experienced, the hatred that Black communities and Asian and people of color have experienced, it's the same. Yeah. It's the same across the board. And yes, there are different dynamics and different severity of things, but if we're able to realize that the hatred that my community experience is also being felt by other communities, how can I then also help have compassion and also fight the injustices of those other communities? And I think that's important, that we all see that all of these things are intersected and we all have a responsibility to stand up against hatred.
There's always going to be an element in society that wants to focus on the otherness, on the fact that we are more different than we are alike. Here's something else I know, is that we have the power to change. We have the power to make a different decision, make different decisions continuously. We can choose to also be inclusive. We can do so by educating, by continuously speaking up, by exposing things when they are hurtful or are hate-filled. I hope you take this as an encouragement and inspiration to continuously to speak up when things do not feel like they're inclusive. This is how we're going to create change. I'm Silva Harapetian. See you next time.